The dust devils danced across Main Street like drunken spirits, carrying the acrid smell of coal smoke and cheap lye soap through Laredo Flats. Claire McKendry squinted through the grimy window of her photography shop, watching the afternoon sun paint everything the color of dried blood. The New Mexico territory had a way of making even the prettiest things look tired. And after 3 years here, she felt she was no exception. She turned back to her work, adjusting the brass knobs on her camera with practiced fingers stained perpetually black from silver nitrate and ink. The bell above her door chimed, and she didn't need to look up to know who it was. Afternoon. Mrs. McKendry. Rosa Delgado's voice carried the musical lilt of her Mexican heritage, softened by years of careful English practice. I have those papers you asked for. Claire wiped her hands on her leather apron and took the bundle of documents. Call me Claire. Rosa. We've been through this. Rosa smiled, but there was worry in her dark eyes. My husband, he says Mr. Hardwick came by again yesterday, with more men this time. The name made Claire's jaw tighten. Silas Hardwick had arrived in Laredo Flats 6 months ago with enough money to buy half the territory and enough arrogance to think he deserved the other half. The railroad was coming, and men like Hardwick could smell opportunity like buzzards smell death. Did they threaten you? Not with words. Rosa's fingers twisted in her worn calico skirt. But they measured our land, right in front of Miguel. Like we weren't even there. Claire set the papers on her desk, next to the Remington typewriter she'd hauled all the way from Philadelphia. We'll get these ownership documents properly notarized. Judge Fitzgerald in Santa Fe owes me a favor from when I photographed his daughter's wedding. Once we have official copies. A gunshot cracked through the air, followed by shouting from the direction of the mine road. Both women rushed to the window. Probably another claim dispute, Claire muttered, but her hands were already reaching for her father's old Colt .45 hidden beneath the counter. The commotion grew louder. Through the dusty haze, Claire could make out Sheriff Dugan's considerable bulk mounted on his bay mare, leading a group of armed men toward the town square. Between them, a lone figure walked with his hands bound, head high despite the circumstances. Even from a distance, Claire recognized Elias Crowell, though most folks called him Crow on account of his dark hair and solitary ways. He worked the mines when there was work, hunted when there wasn't, and kept to himself in a cabin somewhere up Agua Clara way. His clothes were perpetually stained with motor oil and coal dust, earning him a reputation as the filthy one among the more genteel citizens of Laredo Flats. What's Crow done now? Rosa whispered. Existed, probably. Claire replied, That's crime enough for some folks. They watched as the procession reached the square. Hardwick emerged from the Cattleman's Hotel, his white suit immaculate despite the dust, looking like a man who just won a considerable pot at poker. Caught him red-handed, Dugan's voice boomed across the square. Trying to derail a supply train headed for the railroad camp. Could have killed a dozen men. Claire frowned. That doesn't sound like Crow. You know him? Rosa asked. He brought me a mountain cat pelt last winter. Could have sold it for good money in Santa Fe, but he knew I needed it for the cold. Wouldn't take more than a fair trade for it. Claire's eyes narrowed as she watched Hardwick shake Dugan's hand. A man who'd do that doesn't derail trains. More townspeople gathered, drawn by drama like moths to flame. Claire recognized most of them storekeepers, saloon girls, ranch hands come to town for supplies. Father O'Rourke emerged from his church, his weathered face creased with concern. String him up, someone shouted from the crowd. Teach these troublemakers a lesson. Now, now! Hardwick raised his hands in a gesture of mock restraint, his gold rings catching the light. We're civilized people. We'll do this proper-like. Trial at dawn, hanging at sunrise. Justice will be served. Crow finally spoke, his voice carrying despite the crowd. Hard to serve justice when the judge, jury, and executioner all eat from the same trough. Dugan's meaty fist connected with Crow's jaw, dropping him to his knees. "Shut your mouth! Thief!" Claire's hand tightened on the windowsill. She'd seen enough kangaroo courts to know how this would end. The railroad needed examples made of anyone who stood in its way. And Crow, with his reputation as a loner and those perpetually dirty hands, made an easy target. "I should go," Rosa said quietly. "Miguel will worry." Claire walked her to the door. "Be careful, and Rosa, hide those papers somewhere safe, just for now." After Rosa left, Claire returned to her desk but couldn't concentrate. Through her window, she watched them drag Crow to the jail, a converted stable that smelled worse than most actual stables. The crowd dispersed slowly, excited whispers carrying on the wind. By morning, they'd have their entertainment. She thought about the daguerreotype tucked in her drawer herself and James on their wedding day, both so young and certain that love conquered all. James had lasted exactly 3 months in the territory before a fever took him, leaving her with a photography business she barely understood and a loneliness sharp as alkali dust. The sun began its descent, painting Laredo Flats in shades of amber and rust. Claire made her decision. She locked up her shop and headed for the telegraph office. "Need to send a message to Judge Fitzgerald in Santa Fe," she told Horace, the elderly operator. "Line's down," Horace said without looking up from his penny dreadful. "Storm somewhere south. Been down all day." How convenient. Claire left without another word, her mind already turning. In her shop, she had something more valuable than guns or money, she had knowledge. Her father hadn't just taught her photography. He'd taught her about paper, about ink, about the 1,000 tiny ways documents could tell the truth or lie. She lit a lamp and pulled out the box of official documents she'd been asked to copy over the year's land deeds. Mining claims, bills of sale. Her fingers traced the edges of Sheriff Dugan's official seal on a tax notice from last month. Then she examined the arrest warrant someone had nailed to the post outside. Even in the lamplight, the differences were obvious to trained eyes. The spacing was wrong, the ink too fresh, the seal's edges too sharp. A forgery, hastily done, but good enough to fool people who wanted to be fooled. Claire sat back, her heart pounding. She'd known Laredo Flats was corrupt, but this was bold even for Hardwick. Frame a man, hang him quick, and use his death to scare others into submission. Crow was just the beginning. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling her windows. The first storms of the season were coming, bringing chaos and cover in equal measure. She had until dawn to decide what kind of woman she was, the kind who kept her head down and survived, or the kind who stood up and fought. Her eyes fell on James's photograph again. He'd loved her for her spirit. He'd said, wouldn't do to disappoint him now. Claire began to plan. She'd need money, real money, not promises. She'd need witnesses, and most of all, she'd need courage enough to face down the most powerful man in the territory. As if in answer to her thoughts, the wind howled louder, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the desert like a promise of things to come. In his cell, Crow sat in the darkness, unaware that a widow with ink-stained fingers was about to gamble everything on the worth of his filthy hands. The church bell tolled midnight, 6 hours until dawn. 6 hours to change the course of 2 lives and maybe save a town's soul in the bargain. Claire opened her safe and counted out the gold coins she'd saved for emergencies. Well, if this wasn't an emergency, she didn't know what was. Tomorrow, Laredo Flats would see something it had never seen before, justice served by unexpected hands. The storm was coming, and Claire McKendry was ready to meet it. The lamp flame flickered as Claire spread the documents across her desk like a card sharp laying out a hand. The forged arrest warrant sat beside the genuine tax notice, their differences glaring under her magnifying glass. The seal on the warrant was too perfect, real seals showed wear, tiny imperfections from repeated use. This one looked fresh pressed, probably made within the last day. Thunder rumbled closer, and the first fat drops of rain splattered against her window. A dust storm was building. The kind that turned day to night and made men lose their way 5 feet from their own door. By morning, it would blanket Laredo Flats in a choking shroud. Claire's fingers traced the forged seal's edge. Someone had access to official stamps, or at least excellent copies. Her mind went to Hardwick's hotel office, where she'd once photographed him signing contracts with investors from back east. He'd had a whole drawer of stamps and seals. For convenience, he'd said with that snake oil smile. She needed to see Crow, needed to know what really happened at the railroad camp. But the jail would be guarded, and Deputy Ellis, young and eager to please, wouldn't let her near a condemned man at this hour. Unless... Claire opened another drawer and pulled out a different set of documents, blank contracts for indentured service. The territory still honored such arrangements. Holdovers from an older time when labor was scarce and law was whatever men with guns said it was. She'd typed up several for the judge in Santa Fe, cases where petty criminals could work off their sentences instead of rotting in prison. Her fingers flew across the typewriter keys, the mechanical clicking loud in the storm-hushed night. She drafted a contract of labor redemption, 60 days of service in exchange for commutation of sentence. It was legal, if unconventional. She'd seen it done twice before, though never for a man condemned to hang. The church bell tolled 2 in the morning. 4 hours. Claire dressed carefully her most severe black dress, the one that made her look like a respectable widow rather than a woman who just gambled her life savings on a madman's scheme. She pinned her hair tight, no strand out of place. Appearances mattered in frontier justice. The storm hit full force as she stepped outside. Wind-driven dust and rain turned the air to mud, coating everything in a layer of reddish paste. Claire pulled her shawl over her head and pushed forward, the documents wrapped in oilcloth beneath her arm. The jail squatted at the end of Main Street like a toad made of adobe and regret. One window glowed with lamplight, Deputy Ellis on watch. As expected, Claire squared her shoulders and knocked. Ellis opened the door, his young face creased with confusion. "Mrs. McKendry, what are you doing out in this weather?" "I need to see the prisoner." "Can't do that, ma'am. Sheriff's orders. Nobody sees him until the trial." Claire let the shawl fall back, revealing her carefully composed expression of widow's grief. "Please, Deputy, I knew his mother back in Missouri. She was kind to me when James passed. I need to give him a message from her. Surely even condemned men deserve that small mercy." Ellis wavered. He was 22, fresh from Ohio farmland, still young enough to believe in things like mercy and mother's messages. "I suppose, but just for a minute, and I'll have to search you for weapons." Claire submitted to the awkward pat-down, grateful she'd left the Colt at home. Ellis led her through the cramped office to the cells in back. The smell hit her first unwashed bodies, fear sweat, and the particular odor of hope abandoned. Crow sat on the narrow bunk, his face a map of bruises in the lamplight. His clothes were indeed filthy oil stains, coal dust, dried blood from Dugan's fist. But his eyes were clear, intelligent, watching her approach with wary interest. "You're the photographer," he said. His voice was rougher than she remembered, like he'd been breathing smoke. "I am. And you're innocent." A bitter smile cracked his split lip. "A lot of innocent men hang. What makes you think I'm one of them?" Claire glanced at Ellis, who hovered nearby, trying to look official. "Deputy, might I have a moment? His mother's message is personal." "I can't." "I'll stand right here where you can see me through the door. What harm could a widow do to a man already condemned?" Ellis reluctantly retreated to the doorway. Claire moved closer to the bars, lowering her voice. "The arrest warrant is forged. I can prove it, but I need to know what really happened at the railroad camp." Crow studied her for a long moment. "Why do you care?" "Because Hardwick wants something, and he's willing to kill you to get it. That makes you either very dangerous or very inconvenient. Which is it? Maybe I just wouldn't sell." "Sell what?" Crow was quiet so long Claire thought he wouldn't answer. Then, water rights. I've got a claim up Agua Clara Canyon. Nothing much, but it sits on the best water source for 50 miles. Railroad needs water for the steam engines. Hardwick offered to buy last month. I said no. The pieces clicked together in Claire's mind. Control the water. Control the railroad. Control the railroad. Control the territory. So he frames you for sabotage, hangs you as an example, and your claim reverts to public land, which he'll scoop up before my body's cold. Crow leaned forward, his face inches from the bars. But knowing that don't change nothing. Dugan's in Hardwick's pocket. Half the town owes him money. Who's going to stand against that? I am. The words hung between them like a challenge. Crow laughed, short and sharp. A widow with a camera shop. No offense, Mrs. McKendry, but I have a plan, and call me Claire. She pulled out the contract. Have you heard of labor redemption laws? He hadn't, Claire explained quickly, aware of time bleeding away with each word. Buy his sentence, claim his labor, keep him alive long enough to expose Hardwick's scheme. You're crazy, Crow said when she finished. Even if Dugan accepts it, Hardwick will never let me live long enough to testify against him. Then we'll have to make sure he doesn't have a choice. Claire met his eyes. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking if you want to live. Another long silence. Outside, the storm raged harder, rattling the jail's tin roof. My hands are dirty, Crow said finally. Always have been. Coal dust, oil, blood sometimes. Folks like Hardwick, they look at me and see something worth less than the dirt under their nails. I see hands that work. That's more than Hardwick's ever done. Claire pushed the contract through the bars. Sign it. Let me try. Crow took the paper with hands that shook slightly from what Claire couldn't tell. He read it carefully, like a man who'd been tricked before. Why? He asked again. Really why? Claire thought of Rosa's frightened eyes, of James's photograph, of all the small cruelties she'd witnessed and said nothing about. Because someone has to, because I can. Because maybe I'm tired of watching good people disappear while bad men prosper. I'm not good people. You're better than the man who wants you dead. That's enough for now. Crow signed the contract with quick, decisive strokes. His signature was surprisingly elegant for a man with such rough hands. Deputy, Claire called. Ellis appeared immediately. I need you to witness this document. Mr. Crowell is signing a labor contract with me, contingent on commutation of his sentence. Ellis's eyes widened. Mrs. McKendry, I don't think... It's legal. Deputy, you can check the territory statutes if you like. Article 7, Section 4. A condemned man can be redeemed through labor contract if the contractor pays his full assessed fine and court costs. She'd memorized the statute on her walk over, repeating it like a prayer against the storm. Ellis took the contract with reluctant fingers. Sheriff Dugan won't like this. Then wake him. Let him explain to the whole town why he's refusing a legal remedy. Let him put it in writing. Claire's voice hardened. Unless you want to be the one to explain to Judge Fitzgerald why you violated territory law. The young deputy's face went pale. He'd heard stories about Judge Fitzgerald, a man who'd once fined a sheriff half a year's wages for contempt of court. Ellis signed the witness line with a shaking hand. I'll need to fetch the sheriff. He stammered. Do that. I'll wait here with Mr. Crowell. After Ellis left, Claire sagged against the wall. The hardest part was yet to come. You know Dugan will find a way around this, Crow said quietly. He'll try, but by then, half the town will know about it. Hard to hang a man in secret once people start asking questions. Hardwick owns half the town. Not the half that matters. Claire thought of Father O'Rourke, of Rosa and Miguel, of all the small farmers and shopkeepers ground down by Hardwick's boot. People are scared, not broken. There's a difference. The storm reached its peak. turning the world outside into a howling void. Claire sat on the floor, back against the wall, suddenly exhausted. She'd thrown the dice. Now came the waiting. "Your husband," Crow said. "He approve of you taking such risks." "He's dead. Fever 3 years ago." "I'm sorry." "So was I, for a long time." Claire closed her eyes. But grief's like coal dust. Clings to everything until one day you realize you can't live covered in it anymore. You have to wash it off or let it bury you. Some stains don't wash off. Then you learn to live with dirty hands. They sat in companionable silence while the storm raged and time crept toward dawn. Claire dozed despite herself, jerking awake to the sound of angry voices approaching. Sheriff Dugan burst through the door like a bear roused from hibernation, his face red with fury and drink. Hardwick followed, somehow still immaculate despite the storm. "Oh, what the hell is this about a labor contract?" Dugan roared. Claire stood slowly, brushing dust from her skirts. She was done being afraid. "It's about the law, Sheriff, something you swore to uphold, if memory serves." The confrontation was coming. Dawn was coming. And Claire McKendry, widow and photographer, was ready for both. The real game was about to begin. The storm had broken, leaving Main Street a river of mud beneath a gray dawn sky. The gallows stood in the town square like a skeleton finger pointing at heaven, rope already swaying in the morning breeze. Half of Laredo Flats had gathered despite the early hour, drawn by the promise of swift frontier justice. Claire stood at the edge of the crowd, her black dress still damp from the night's rain. The leather purse at her side held every cent she owned, so gold coins, silver dollars, even the emergency fund she'd hidden behind a loose board in her shop. The labor contract was tucked inside her bodice, close to her racing heart. "Make way!" Sheriff Dugan's voice boomed across the square. He rode at the head of a small procession, his badge glinting dully in the weak sunlight. Behind him, Crow walked between two guards, hands bound, head high. His clothes were even filthier than the night before, caked with jail cell grime and dried blood. Hardwick emerged from the cattleman's hotel, adjusting his pearl cufflinks. His lawyer, a thin man named Pemberton from Kansas City, carried a leather case that probably held more forged documents. They took their places on the makeshift platform beside the gallows, Hardwick nodding graciously to the crowd as if presiding over a social gathering. "Good citizens of Laredo Flats," Dugan began, pulling a crumpled paper from his vest. "We are gathered here to witness the execution of justice. Elias Crowell, called Crow, has been found guilty of attempted sabotage of railroad property, endangering innocent lives." "By what court?" Father O'Rourke's voice rang out from the church steps. The priest stood with his Bible clutched to his chest, gray eyes blazing. "I saw no judge, no jury, only accusations in the night and a verdict at dawn." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Dugan's face reddened. "This is a matter of railroad security. Father, special circumstances." "Special circumstances still require law," someone else shouted. Claire recognized Ben Martinez, who ran the feed store. Others took up the cry, voices rising in Spanish and English. Hardwick stepped forward, raising his hands for silence. "Good people, please. We must have order. The evidence against this man is overwhelming. Deputy Ellis himself can testify." "Then let's hear from Deputy Ellis," Claire called out, stepping into the open space before the platform. Every head turned. Hardwick's smile faltered for just a moment. "Mrs. McKendry," he said smoothly, "this is hardly a matter for ladies. Justice is a matter for everyone." Claire reached into her purse, pulling out the heavy leather pouch. "Which is why I'm here to invoke Article 7, Section 4 of the Territory Statutes." The crowd stirred. Pemberton leaned forward, whispering urgently in Hardwick's ear. Claire continued, her voice carrying clear across the square. A condemned man may be redeemed through labor contract if his full fine and court costs are paid. I have here $800 in gold and silver. I offer to purchase Mr. Crowell's sentence." The silence was deafening. Then someone laughed, a regulator standing near the gallows. "You want to buy him what for? Widow woman gonna have him polish your cameras with them filthy hands." "Don't hang him," Claire shouted, her voice ringing off the adobe walls. "I'll buy him first." She held the pouch high, letting the morning light catch the gleam of gold through the leather. "Call him filthy, but his hands hold worth you men with clean cuffs and dirty consciences could never understand. Those hands have pulled men from mine collapses, brought meat to hungry families, built half the decent structures in this town. I'll take 60 days of that labor over 60 years of your kind of justice." The crowd exploded. Some cheered. Some booed. Most simply stared in shock. A woman, a widow, challenging Hardwick publicly? It was unprecedented. Hardwick's face had gone pale beneath his careful tan. "Sheriff, remove this hysterical woman." "On what charge?" Claire pulled out the contract, holding it up. "Deputy Ellis witnessed this document last night. Mr. Crowell has agreed to the terms. Unless you're saying territory law doesn't apply in Laredo Flats." She'd trapped him neatly, refused the contract publicly, and he'd advertise his corruption to everyone present. Accept it, and Crow would live to potentially testify about the water rights. Pemberton whispered frantically to Hardwick, who whispered to Dugan, who looked like he wanted to shoot everyone present and ride for Mexico. The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama better than any traveling show. "This is highly irregular," Pemberton finally said, his reedy voice barely audible. "The prisoner hasn't been formally tried." "Then try him now." Father O'Rourke descended from the church steps, Bible in hand. "Let's have testimony, evidence, proper procedure, unless Mr. Hardwick objects to law and order." More voices joined in. Claire saw Rosa and Miguel near the Mercantile, Doc Holcomb by his surgery, even some of Hardwick's own ranch hands looking uncertain. The momentum was shifting. Hardwick made a swift calculation. His smile returned, cold as winter moonlight. "Of course we support the law," he said smoothly. "Sheriff, examine the woman's offer. If it meets legal requirements, we must honor it. We are, after all, civilized people." Dugan looked like he'd swallowed a rattlesnake, but he dismounted and approached Claire. His hands shook slightly as he counted the money, examined the contract. The crowd pressed closer, everyone straining to see. It appears to be in order." Dugan ground out, $800. "Contract's legal. Then I claim Elias Crowell for 60 days' labor." Claire announced, "Release him." "Not so fast." Hardwick's voice cut through the celebrating crowd. "The contract specifies labor. Mrs. McKendry. Hard labor. Are you certain you want to take responsibility for such a dangerous man? If he runs, if he commits any crime during those 60 days, you'll be held accountable. The full weight of the law will fall on you." Claire met his gaze steadily. "I accept full responsibility." "And where will he stay? Surely not in your home. That would be improper." Snickers ran through some of the men. Claire felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice level. "He'll stay in the shed behind my shop, under lock at night, as the contract specifies." She turned to Crow, who'd watched the entire exchange in stunned silence. "That is, if he agrees to work honestly for fair wages and board." Crow's eyes met hers. Something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or just mutual recognition of the insanity they were embarking on. "I agree," he said simply. Hardwick's jaw clenched, but his smile never wavered. "Then it's settled. Sheriff, release the prisoner into Mrs. McKendry's care. But mark me, all of you." His gaze swept the crowd. "This woman has chosen to harbor a saboteur. When he shows his true nature, remember who enabled him." "The only thing I'm enabling Claire shot back. Is justice delayed, not denied? 60 days is plenty of time for the truth to surface. The threat hung in the air like gun smoke. Hardwick's eyes promised retribution, but he simply nodded to Pemberton and strode back toward his hotel. His regulators followed, hands on their pistols, faces dark with promise. Dugan cut Crow's bonds with excessive force, accidentally nicking his wrist. You've got 60 days. Crowl, step 1 foot wrong, and I'll hang you myself, legal-like. Crow rubbed his wrists, leaving streaks of blood on his already filthy sleeves. He looked at Claire like she was either an angel or utterly mad. Why? He asked quietly. I told you last night. Claire picked up her empty purse, trying not to think about the fortune she'd just spent. Someone has to. The crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excitement and speculation. Some nodded respectfully to Claire as they passed. Others gave her wide berth. She'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Father O'Rourke approached, his weathered face grave. That was brave. Mrs. McKendry, also dangerous. Hardwick won't forget this. I'm counting on it, Father. The priest studied her, then nodded slowly. If you need sanctuary. I'll need witnesses more than sanctuary. Can I count on you? Always, child, though I fear what's coming will test us all. As the square emptied, Claire found herself alone with Crow. He stood awkwardly, like a man who'd forgotten how to exist outside a cell. I suppose you'll want me to start work immediately, he said. I want you to eat first, and wash. When's the last time you had a decent meal? He couldn't remember. Claire sighed and started toward her shop, very aware of eyes watching from windows and doorways. The whole town would be talking by noon. Mrs. McKendry Claire. Crow's voice stopped her. You just spent everything you had on a man most folks wouldn't spit on if he was burning. I need to know why. The real reason. Claire turned back, seeing him clearly in the morning light. Beneath the dirt and bruises was a man who'd survived things that would break others. She recognized that look. She saw it in her own mirror every morning. Because I'm tired of men like Hardwick deciding who lives and dies based on who's useful to them. Because the law should mean something more than who has the deepest pockets. And because... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Because I recognize a stacked deck when I see one, and I've always hated cheaters. Crow studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough, but you know this isn't over. Not by half. I'm counting on that too. Claire started walking again. Now come on, we've got 60 days to prove your innocence and expose a conspiracy. We'd better get started. Behind them, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising more chaos to come. But for now, the sun broke through, painting Laredo Flats in shades of gold and possibility. Claire McKendry had rolled the dice on justice. The game was far from over. The shed behind Claire's photography shop had served as storage for chemicals and equipment. Now it housed a man who smelled strongly of lye soap and looked uncomfortable in the clean clothes she'd procured from the mercantile. Crow sat on the narrow cot, examining his hands as if seeing them for the first time in days. The soap stings, he said, touching a cut on his knuckle. Better than infection. Claire set down a plate of beans and cornbread. Eat, then we'll discuss the work. She'd already faced 3 visitors that morning, Mrs. Abernathy from the Ladies' Temperance Society, warning about propriety, Ben Martinez, quietly offering support, and Deputy Ellis, ostensibly checking that the prisoner was properly secured but really trying to apologize with his eyes for his part in the near hanging. Crow ate like a man who'd forgotten food could have flavor. Claire busied herself organizing tools, very aware of his presence in her small domain. The contract specified labor, nothing more. She'd make that crystal clear to anyone who suggested otherwise. What kind of work did you have in mind? Crow asked, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, then catching himself and using the napkin she'd provided. Everything. Claire gestured to the shop. The printing press needs maintenance. The pipe from the water tower leaks. There's a month's worth of equipment to clean and catalog. Plus, Rosa Delgado needs irrigation ditches dug before planting season. You're helping the Mexicans with their land. I'm helping citizens with their legal documentation. Rosa happens to need both paperwork and water channels. Crow stood, steadier now, with food in him. Show me the press first. Machinery I understand. They worked in companionable silence for 2 hours. Crow's hands, despite their reputation for filth, moved with surprising delicacy around the press's intricate mechanisms. He diagnosed problems quickly, fixed them efficiently. Claire found herself watching those hands scarred, calloused, but unexpectedly gentle with things that mattered. You know your way around equipment, she observed. Worked in a print shop in St. Louis before the war. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. Everyone had befores they didn't discuss. By noon, the press ran smoother than it had since James died. Crow had also repaired 2 cameras and reorganized her chemical storage for better safety. Claire was impressed despite herself. Time for lunch, she announced. We'll eat at the shop. Let the town see you're working, not plotting sabotage. Main Street buzzed with activity and whispers. Claire kept her head high as they walked. Crow slightly behind as the contract required. She felt eyes tracking them, some curious, some hostile. Most simply amazed at the audacity of it all. At the shop, she found a package waiting, a bottle of French wine with a card in Hardwick's flowing script. To celebrate your new acquisition, may you get what you deserve. S.H. Subtle, Crow muttered. Claire dropped the bottle in the waste bin with a satisfying crash. I prefer coffee anyway. They ate sandwiches while Claire spread out her real work, the documents she'd been collecting, the inconsistencies she'd noticed, the pattern of Hardwick's land grabs. Look at this, she said, pointing to a map. Every piece of property Hardwick's acquired in the last 6 months. Notice anything? Crow studied the markings. They form a line. Not just any line, the proposed railroad route. But the official survey isn't supposed to be complete for another month. He knows where they're building. More than knows. He's directing it. Claire pulled out another paper. This is a copy of a letter I photographed last month when Hardwick hired me to document a meeting. He thought I was just taking portraits. Didn't notice when I captured the papers on his desk. The letter outlined payments to someone identified only as DSOC for ensuring favorable survey results. Crow said slowly. Dennis Cartwright. He's the federal surveyor. Comes through every few months. Drinks at the Red Moon. Loses big at poker. And suddenly has money to cover his debts whenever Hardwick's in town. They worked through the afternoon. Crow sharing what he knew of the water rights. The mine claims. The small ranchers being squeezed out. Claire documented everything, her typewriter clicking steadily. You're building a case, Crow realized. I'm building a weapon. Paper and ink can be mightier than guns, if you know how to use them. Hardwick has guns, too, and men willing to use them. As if to underscore his point, a rock crashed through the front window, wrapped in paper. Claire unwrapped it carefully. Mind your own business or burn with it, was scrawled in charcoal. Eloquent, Claire said dryly, but her hands shook slightly as she set the note aside. Crow moved to the window, scanning the street. They're getting bolder. Good. Bold men make mistakes. But Claire locked the door and pulled the curtains anyway. They returned to work. But the atmosphere had changed. The intimacy of shared danger drew them closer, made the shop feel smaller. When Claire reached for a document at the same moment Crow did, their hands touched. Both pulled back as if burned. I should check that water pipe. Crow said abruptly, Yes, good idea. He fled to the back room. Claire pressed her palms against her hot cheeks. Annoyed at herself. She was a grown woman, not a schoolgirl. The contract was business, nothing more. But when Crow returned, shirt damp with sweat and a streak of grease across his cheek, something in her chest tightened. He looked more alive than he had in the jail. More real, more dangerous in an entirely different way. "Pipes fixed," he reported. "But you'll need new fittings soon. The whole system's corroded." Story of this town. Everything's corroding from the inside out. They worked until dusk, when Rosa arrived with Miguel and 2 other Mexican farmers. Claire had promised to photograph their families and land holdings, creating an indisputable record of their presence. "You're sure this will help?" Rosa asked nervously. "Documentation is powerful," Claire assured her. "Hard to steal land from people who can prove they exist." She set up the camera while Crow helped position the subjects. He spoke to them in surprisingly good Spanish, putting them at ease. Another layer to the man she'd bought? The photo session took an hour. Claire captured not just faces, but lives, the tools they used, the land they worked, the homes they'd built, evidence of belonging that no forged document could erase. "Gracias, señora," Miguel said, pressing a small leather pouch into her hands. "It's not much. It's payment for services rendered," Claire said firmly, knowing their pride needed this to be business, not charity. "I'll have prints ready in 3 days." After they left, Crow helped her develop the plates. The chemical smell filled the dark room as images emerged like ghosts on glass. "You're documenting everything," he observed, "not just their land claims. A people's history, the one folks like Hardwick pretend doesn't exist." Claire hung the plates to dry. "My father taught me that photographs capture truth in a way words can't. Hard to deny someone's humanity when you're looking them in the eye." "Your father sounds wise." "He was also stubborn, idealistic, and too trusting for his own good. I inherited all of it." They emerged from the dark room to find night had fallen. The shop felt too quiet, too intimate. Claire busied herself with unnecessary tidying. "I should get to the shed," Crow said. "Contract specifies." "I know what it specifies." Claire's voice came out sharper than intended. "I wrote it." An awkward pause stretched between them. "Finally." Crow moved toward the door. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for the food, the work, the chance." "You're paying it back in labor. No thanks needed." "That's not what I'm thanking you for." He left before she could respond. Claire locked the door and leaned against it, heart racing for no reason she cared to examine. Outside, she heard him settling into the shed, the cot creaking under his weight. She'd given him a lantern, blankets, books, more than the contract required, but then nothing about this arrangement was really about the contract anymore. Claire climbed the stairs to her small apartment above the shop, very aware of the man below. In her bedroom, she caught sight of herself in the mirror, hair disheveled, a smudge of chemicals on her collar, eyes bright with something that wasn't just exhaustion. "Foolish woman," she told her reflection. But when she heard Crow moving around in the night, checking locks, standing guard, even though he was supposed to be the prisoner, she felt safer than she had in years. Whatever was growing between them, it was rooted in something real: shared work, shared danger, shared purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Hardwick wouldn't stay quiet long. But tonight, Claire McKendry fell asleep to the sound of another human being nearby, protecting what they were building together. The thought followed her into dreams, where dirty hands and clean hearts could write a different ending to their story. The smell of smoke woke Claire at 3 a.m. She bolted upright, nightgown clinging to her sweat-dampened skin, and knew immediately this wasn't chimney smoke or campfire. This was wrong. "Fire!" Crow's voice boomed from below. "Claire, get out!" She grabbed her robe and the metal box containing her most precious glass negatives, the evidence they'd been collecting. Smoke already seeped under her bedroom door. She wrapped a wet cloth around her face and plunged into the hallway. The photography shop was an inferno. Flames licked up the walls where her chemicals had been stored, feeding on the wooden shelves and paper stock. Through the smoke, she saw Crow fighting the blaze with buckets of water, his face streaked with soot. "The back room!" Claire shouted. "The plates!" "Already got them." He gestured to a box by the door. "Get outside." But Claire dove toward her father's camera, the one James had given her as a wedding gift. Crow cursed and followed, pulling her back as a beam crashed where she'd been standing. "It's not worth dying for." "Nothing in here is just equipment." She broke free and grabbed the camera, cradling it like a child. Together they stumbled into the street where half the town had gathered. Men formed bucket brigades while women corralled children away from the danger. Father O'Rourke organized the effort with military precision. "My shop," Doc Holcomb called. "It'll spread." The wind had picked up desert wind, hungry and dry. It carried embers like fireflies, threatening the whole block. Claire watched her life burn and felt oddly calm. She'd saved what mattered most, the evidence, her father's camera, and somehow, impossibly, Crow had saved her printing press plates. How, she asked him. His hands were badly burned, blistered and raw. Saw someone sneaking around earlier. Had a feeling. He'd wrapped the most important items in wet canvas and hidden them in the alley. Sheriff Dugan appeared, conspicuously late. "Looks like an accident. All those chemicals." "Accident my foot." Ben Martinez spat. "We all know who did this." "That's a serious accusation without proof," Dugan warned. Claire held up a piece of glass she'd found by the broken window. "Kerosene lamp. From the Cattleman's Hotel. See the etching on the base. Should I check if Mr. Hardwick is missing any lamps?" Dugan's face darkened, but before he could respond, a woman's scream cut through the night. Rosa Delgado ran toward them, Miguel limping behind. "They came to our home, men with torches, said we had to leave tonight or burn with our house." The crowd's anger turned palpable. These were working people, frontier people who understood that attacking homes crossed a line even outlaws respected. "Where are these men now?" Father O'Rourke demanded. "Rode toward the railroad camp," Miguel gasped. Crow stepped forward. "I know a shortcut. We can cut them off." "You're not going anywhere," Dugan declared. "You're still under contract." "Which specifies he works for me." Claire interrupted. "And I say his work tonight is protecting this town, unless you'd prefer to explain to Judge Fitzgerald why you prevented citizens from defending themselves." A dozen men volunteered to ride with Crow. Claire wanted to go too, but someone had to coordinate the firefighting efforts. She watched them disappear into the darkness, led by a man who'd almost hanged 3 days ago. The fire took 4 hours to control. Claire's shop was gutted, but they'd saved the adjoining buildings. As dawn broke, she stood in the ruins, sifting through ash and broken glass. Everything smelled of smoke and destroyed dreams. "I'm so sorry," Rosa whispered, clutching Claire's soot-stained hands. "This is our fault. If you hadn't helped us—" "This is Hardwick's fault. No one else's." Claire squeezed back. "Did you save your documents?" "Miguel buried them weeks ago. We learned from our grandparents, never keep all your proof in one place." Smart people. Survivors. Claire was learning their lessons now. The riders returned as the sun climbed higher. Several regulators tied to their saddles, including one Claire recognized as Hardwick's personal bodyguard. Crow dismounted stiffly, his burned hands wrapped in torn fabric. "They won't be burning any more homes," he reported. "Had a disagreement about tactics. Some felt attacking women and children went too far. When we arrived, the disagreement became physical." "You assaulted railroad security," Dugan sputtered. "We defended citizens from arsonists," Ben Martinez corrected. "Big difference. These men confessed to setting fires on Hardwick's orders. Want to arrest them, Sheriff, or should we take them to the county seat ourselves?" Trapped again by his own pretense of law, Dugan grudgingly took the prisoners into custody. though everyone knew they'd be mysteriously released within hours. Claire turned to Crow, noting how he cradled his injured hands. "Let me see." "I'm fine." "You're dripping blood on my ashes. Come on." Doc Holcomb's surgery had become a makeshift treatment center. Claire watched the doctor clean and bandage Crow's hands, trying not to think about how he'd earned those burns saving her life's work. "No permanent damage," Doc announced. "But no heavy labor for a week. Those hands need to heal." "The contract," Crow began. "Says you work as I direct," Claire finished. "I direct you to heal. That's work enough." They walked back to the ruins of her shop. Crow kicked at a melted piece of type. "What will you do now?" "Rebuild? What else?" Claire managed a tired smile. "Hardwick made a mistake. Fire destroys, but it also clarifies. Look." She led him to where neighbors had already started clearing debris. Rosa and Miguel worked alongside Tom Bennett from the bank, who'd refused Hardwick's business just last week. Even Mrs. Abernathy from the Temperance Society wielded a broom, her usual disapproval replaced by righteous anger. "He overplayed his hand?" Claire said, "Attacking you was business, attacking families, burning homes, that's war, and he just united the town against him." Crow studied her with those dark eyes. "You planned for this." "I planned for resistance. I didn't plan for—" She gestured helplessly at the destruction. "For someone to care enough to save your work." The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Claire found herself studying his face, seeing past the soot and exhaustion to something deeper. When had this complicated man become essential to her? "I should thank you," she said softly. "No thanks needed, just returning the favor." His voice roughened. "You saved my life. Least I could do was save your legacy." They were standing too close. Claire could smell smoke and sweat and something uniquely him. She swayed forward slightly, drawn by exhaustion and emotion, and Mrs. McKendry. Deputy Ellis appeared, breaking the moment. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a telegram from Santa Fe." Claire took the paper with trembling fingers. Judge Fitzgerald's response to the message she'd managed to send before the fire. "Investigating claims. Sending Marshal Cole to assess situation. Maintain all evidence. Justice coming." 3 days, she breathed. "We just have to last 3 more days." "Hardwick won't wait," Crow warned. "He'll know what this means." As if summoned by his name, Hardwick appeared across the square, immaculate as always despite the chaos. He surveyed the damage with satisfaction before his gaze found Claire. He touched his hat in mock salute, then made a gesture thumb across throat that needed no translation. "Let him come," Claire said, surprising herself with her steady voice. "I'm done being afraid." That afternoon, they set up temporary operations in the church. Father O'Rourke offered his rectory, transforming it into a makeshift courthouse of public opinion. Citizens came forward with stories extortion, threats, suspicious fires blamed on accidents. Claire documented everything while Crow, despite his bandaged hands, organized security. As evening fell, they found themselves alone in the sanctuary. Claire sat in a pew, exhausted beyond measure. Crow joined her, maintaining careful distance. "You should sleep," he said. "Can't, too much to do. You're no good to anyone dead on your feet." Claire laughed, short and bitter. "I'm no good to anyone with my shop burned and my equipment destroyed." "That's not true." His voice was quiet but firm. "You gave this town something it forgot it had. Hope. That's worth more than any building." She looked at him then, really looked. Saw the pain he was hiding, the exhaustion, the stubborn determination that matched her own. Without thinking, she reached for his bandaged hand. "Does it hurt?" "Everything hurts. Been that way so long I'd forgotten it could be different." He turned his hand, carefully interlacing their fingers. "Until recently." The church was silent except for their breathing. Claire knew she should pull away, maintain the boundaries the contract required. Instead, she leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "This is complicated," she whispered. "Everything worth doing is—" They sat that way as darkness fell. Two damaged people finding strength in each other. Tomorrow would bring new battles. Marshal Cole might arrive too late. Hardwick certainly wouldn't surrender without a fight. But tonight, in God's house, with their joined hands speaking vows neither dared voice aloud, Claire McKendry and Elias Crowell found something worth more than gold or justice. They found peace in the promise of each other. The storm hit just as Father O'Rourke's church filled with people. Wind howled through gaps in the adobe walls, rattling windows and nerves alike. What had started as a town meeting had transformed into an impromptu trial when Hardwick arrived with Sheriff Dugan and 6 armed regulators. "This has gone far enough," Hardwick's voice cut through the murmur of assembled citizens. "I demand the arrest of Rosa and Miguel Delgado for forgery and fraud." Claire stood from her position near the altar where she'd been organizing documents. "On what evidence?" This Pemberton, the lawyer, produced a paper with a flourish. A supposed land grant from the Mexican government, dated 1846. Obviously fabricated, the seal is wrong. The language contains errors no official document would have. Rosa gripped Miguel's arm, face pale. Claire moved to stand beside them. Crow flanking their other side despite his bandaged hands. "May I examine this evidence?" Claire asked calmly. "You're not a lawyer, Mrs. McKendry," Pemberton sneered. "No, but I am an expert in documents and reproduction. Father O'Rourke, might we use your table?" The priest nodded, and the crowd pressed closer as Claire spread out the challenged document. She pulled out her magnifying glass, one of the few tools salvaged from the fire, and began her examination. "Interesting," she murmured. "Mr. Pemberton, you say the seal is wrong. Obviously, compare it to any genuine Mexican document from that period." "I shall." Claire produced another paper from her portfolio. "This is a certified copy of a land transfer from 1845 obtained from the Territorial Archives last year. Notice the seal." She held both documents up to the lamplight. The seals were identical in every detail. "Then both are forgeries," Pemberton declared. "Or both are genuine." Claire's voice remained steady despite the wind now shrieking outside. "Tell me, Mr. Pemberton, what errors in language did you notice?" The lawyer began pointing out supposed flaws in grammar and spelling. Claire listened patiently, then smiled. "You're absolutely right. These aren't errors a Mexican official would make. They're errors an American forger would make, trying to write in Spanish." She pulled out another document. "Like the errors in this forged arrest warrant for Mr. Crowell. Same hand, same mistakes. Your hand, I believe, Mr. Pemberton." The crowd stirred. Thunder crashed overhead, and rain began pounding the roof. "That's a serious accusation," Hardwick said coldly. "Then let's test it." Claire spread out multiple documents. "I've photographed every official paper that's passed through my shop in 3 years. Look at the progression real documents from the county. Then suddenly, 6 months ago, when you arrived, Mr. Hardwick, a new style appears. Same supposed official seal, but tiny differences. The spacing of letters, the pressure points, the ink formulation." She arranged the papers chronologically, even in the lamplight. The pattern was clear. Someone's been forging official documents to steal land, frame innocent men, and pervert justice. Someone with access to official seals and the arrogance to think no one would notice. "Conjecture and conspiracy," Pemberton shouted. "Sheriff, arrest this woman for slander." But Dugan hesitated. The crowd was turning ugly, and not in his favor. Ben Martinez and Tom Bennett stood with several other merchants, hands near their pistols. The Mexican families clustered together, but they weren't cowering, they were ready to fight. Lightning flashed, illuminating the church like divine judgment. In that moment of brilliance, Deputy Ellis stepped forward. "I have something to say." His young voice shook, but carried. "I've kept quiet too long, but I won't be part of murder." Deputy Dugan warned. "No, Sheriff, I'm done." Ellis pulled out a leather notebook. "I've documented every bribe you've taken, every order from Hardwick you've followed, every law you've broken. It's all here, dates and amounts." The confession unleashed chaos. Regulators reached for guns. Citizens dove for cover, and Father O'Rourke's commanding voice rose above the storm. "This is a house of God. Any man who draws a weapon here answers to the Almighty." Whether from respect or superstition, the regulators hesitated. In that pause, Claire seized control. "Mr. Hardwick, you came here demanding arrest for forgery. I'll show you real forgery." She held up the challenged arrest warrant. "But first, Mr. Crowell has evidence about why you wanted him dead." Crow stepped forward, producing a worn leather map case. "Water surveys of the Agua Clara Valley, done by my father in '65, updated by me every year since. Shows the natural aquifers, the seasonal flows, and exactly where the railroad would need to dig wells." He spread the maps on the altar. "Without these water sources, the railroad stops 50 miles short. With them, it runs clear to California. Worth killing for, wouldn't you say, Hardwick?" "Those surveys are meaningless without legal claim to the water," Hardwick said, but sweat beaded his forehead despite the church's chill. "You mean, like this claim?" Crow produced another document. "Filed in '71, renewed every year, fees paid in full, including last month, which is why you needed me dead before the renewal date." The storm reached its crescendo. Wind tore at the church doors, rain hammered the windows, and somewhere close, lightning struck with a sound like God's own hammer. Then, cutting through the chaos, came a new voice from the doorway. "U.S. Marshal Cole, everyone freeze." A tall man in a rain slicker stood silhouetted against the storm, water streaming from his hat. Behind him, 4 deputies with rifles. "Judge Fitzgerald sent me to investigate reports of corruption and land fraud." His eyes swept the assembled crowd, taking in the drawn weapons, the scattered documents, the clear division between Hardwick's men and the townspeople. "Seems I arrived just in time. Marshal, these people are interfering with lawful arrests." Dugan began. "Sheriff Dugan, you're relieved of duty pending investigation." Cole's voice brooked no argument. "Deputy Ellis, I understand you have evidence to present." What followed was methodical as any court proceeding. Despite the storm raging outside, Ellis presented his documentation. Claire laid out the pattern of forgeries. Crow explained the water rights scheme. Rosa and Miguel, through tears, told of threats and intimidation. Hardwick tried to bluster, to bribe, to threaten, but Cole was incorruptible, and the evidence was overwhelming. "Silas Hardwick, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Mr. Pemberton, you as well for forgery and corruption of justice." "You can't," Hardwick lunged for the door, but Crow's fist bandages and all dropped him cold. "That's for trying to hang me?" Crow said mildly. The regulators, seeing their paymaster in irons, melted away into the storm. They'd find no welcome in Laredo Flats now. As Hardwick and his conspirators were led away, the storm began to break. Wind dropped to a whisper, rain softened to a patter, and through the church windows, the faint promise of dawn appeared. Claire sank into a pew, suddenly exhausted. The fight was over. They'd won. Around her, townspeople embraced, cried, celebrated their deliverance. And Mrs. McKendry, Marshal Cole approached. "Judge Fitzgerald sends his compliments, says to tell you justice delayed is better than justice denied." Tell him thank you, and Marshall, the contract on Mr. Crowell was based on false charges. Consider it void." Cole smiled. "Though I suspect you'll want to negotiate new terms." He left them alone in the slowly emptying church. Crow sat beside Claire, close but not touching. "It's over," she said wonderingly. "The legal part. Maybe." He flexed his bandaged hands. "Still have to rebuild. Your shop, the town, everything Hardwick poisoned. If you'll have me, not as contracted labor, as a partner, maybe, or—" He trailed off, uncertainty replacing his usual stoicism. Claire looked at him, this man who'd entered her life in chains and somehow become essential to it. Dawn light caught the silver threads in his dark hair, highlighted the strength in his scarred hands. "Or," she prompted softly, "or whatever you'll allow. I'm not good with words. Claire, better with actions. But I know I don't want to leave. Not the town, not the work we started, not you." Outside, the storm had passed entirely. Sunlight broke through the clouds, painting the church in gold and promise. The bell tower, which had survived wind and rain, began to toll not in alarm this time, but in celebration. Claire took Crow's bandaged hand in both of hers, careful of his injuries but firm in her intent. "Partners," she agreed. "In business, in rebuilding, in whatever comes next." His smile transformed his face, years of hardship falling away. "That's more than I dared hope." "Then you should hope bigger." Claire leaned closer. "After all, we just brought down the most powerful man in the territory with nothing but truth and determination. Compared to that, anything seems possible." Father O'Rourke returned then, beaming at the sight of them. "The town wants to celebrate," he announced. "But first, morning prayers. Thanks must be given." They joined the congregation as the sun rose fully, flooding the church with light. Claire stood between Rosa and Crow, hands linked with both, as Father O'Rourke led prayers of gratitude. Justice had come to Laredo Flats, brought by dirty hands and clean hearts, by courage and community. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and full of possibility. And in that golden morning, anything seemed possible indeed. The pursuit began at dawn. Marshal Cole had underestimated Hardwick's desperation. The man had escaped during the night, along with Pemberton and 3 loyal regulators. They'd headed west toward the railroad construction camp where Hardwick kept emergency funds and, more dangerously, enough dynamite to destroy evidence and lives alike. "He's going for the bridge," Crow said, studying the tracks in the dusty ground. "If he blows the crossing, he can delay the marshal's investigation for weeks." Claire sat her borrowed horse awkwardly. Riding had never been her strength. But when word came of Hardwick's escape, she'd insisted on joining the posse. The evidence they needed was at the construction camp, and she knew documents better than anyone. "Plus, he's got those payroll records," Deputy Ellis added. "Promoted to acting sheriff after Dugan's arrest. Names of everyone he's bribed from here to Washington." The posse consisted of 12 riders: Claire, Crow, Ellis, Marshal Cole, 2 federal deputies, and 6 townsmen including Ben Martinez and Tom Bennett. Rosa had wanted to come, but Miguel convinced her to stay and protect their land in case this was a diversion. They rode hard through the morning heat, following the old stage road that paralleled the proposed railroad route. Dust devils swirled in their wake, and overhead, buzzards circled lazily, sensing drama. "There," Crow pointed to smoke rising beyond a ridge. "Construction camp, but something's wrong." As they crested the hill, the scene below confirmed his instincts. The camp was in chaos, workers fleeing, tents ablaze, and near the wooden bridge spanning Agua Clara Gorge, Hardwick and his men were placing dynamite charges. "He's not just destroying evidence," Cole realized. "He's going to flood the valley when the rains come. Without that bridge channeling the water, every farm downstream will be washed away. Claire finished, including the Mexican settlements. Murderer, Ben Martinez spat. Those families have children. Cole organized quickly. Martinez, Bennett, take the federal boys and circle north, cut off their escape. Ellis, get those workers clear. Everyone else, with me. We stop them before they blow that bridge. They thundered down the slope, guns drawn. Hardwick's men opened fire, forcing the posse to take cover behind overturned wagons and equipment. Claire found herself crouched beside Crow, her father's pistol heavy in her hand. You shouldn't be here, he said, firing over the wagon bed. Neither should you, with those hands. She nodded at his still bandaged fingers. Yet here we are. A bullet splintered wood inches from her head. Claire fired back, surprised when one of the regulators yelped and dropped his gun. Nice shot. Crow approved. Your father teach you that too? Among other things. The firefight intensified. Pemberton tried to flee toward the bridge, but Ellis cut him off, tackling the lawyer into the dirt, one by one. The regulators fell or surrendered, until only Hardwick remained, standing on the bridge with a lit torch. Stay back, he screamed. I'll drop this torch and send us all to hell. The dynamite charges were placed at key support points. If they blew, the bridge would collapse into the gorge, creating a dam that would indeed flood the valley come rain season. Hardwick, Cole called out. It's over. Put down the torch. Over. Hardwick laughed wildly. His perfect suit was torn and dusty. His careful composure finally cracked. I own this territory. I was building an empire. You think I'll let some ink-stained widow and her filthy laborer destroy everything? You destroyed yourself, Claire said, stepping into the open despite Crow's grabbed attempt to stop her. With greed, with cruelty, with the belief that money made you untouchable. Don't lecture me. Woman, you think your hands are so clean you worked for me, took my money. Until I learned what you were, then I chose justice over comfort. Claire walked closer, aware of everyone watching. Guns trained on Hardwick. That's what you never understood. Most people, given the choice, will choose right over easy. Pretty words won't stop this torch from falling. No, but this might... Crow had circled around, approaching from Hardwick's blind side. You forgot something. Hardwick, this bridge was built by men like me. We know every beam, every joint. He stomped hard on a specific plank. The board, weakened by hasty construction, splintered. Hardwick stumbled, the torch wavering. And we know which ones you cut corners on. Another stomp, another broken board. Hardwick windmilled for balance, the torch dancing dangerously close to the dynamite. Stop, I'll drop it. Then drop it, Crow said calmly. But know this, we moved the dynamite last night. What you're standing next to is flour sacks and lamp oil. Makes a nice flame, but won't drop the bridge. Hardwick's face went white. He looked down at the charges, then at the torch in his hand. You're bluffing. Am I? Crow smiled grimly. Only one way to find out. For a long moment, Hardwick stood frozen. Then, with a cry of rage and defeat, he hurled the torch not at the false charges, but at Crow. Crow dodged, but his foot went through another weak board. He fell hard, catching himself on the bridge rail as the torch tumbled harmlessly into the gorge. Hardwick ran, but not toward escape. He charged at Claire, pulling a hidden derringer from his vest. Time slowed. Claire saw the gun rise, saw Hardwick's face twisted with hatred, saw death coming for her. Then Crow was there. Wounded hands be damned. Tackling Hardwick in a flying leap, they crashed together onto the bridge decking. The derringer fired wild, the shot echoing across the canyon. They rolled and fought, perilously close to the edge. Hardwick was desperate, but Crow was stronger, fueled by protective rage. He got the gun away, sent it spinning into the void. But Hardwick had one more trick. He pulled a knife, slashing at Crow's already injured hands. Crow cried out, grip loosening, and Hardwick scrambled to his feet. "I'll kill you both, The weakened bridge board he stood on gave way entirely. Hardwick dropped through the hole, catching himself by his fingertips. He dangled over the gorge, expensive boots kicking at empty air. "Help me!" he screamed. "Please!" Crow looked down at him, blood dripping from his reopened wounds. Claire appeared beside him, and together they stared at the man who'd caused so much pain. "You tried to hang him," Claire said quietly. "Tried to burn my shop. Tried to flood innocent families. I'll confess everything I have money hidden. I'll share it, please." Crow knelt, extending his bloody hand. "Difference between us. Hardwick, my hands might be dirty, but they build things, save people. Yours only know how to take and destroy." He grasped Hardwick's wrist. With Claire's help, they hauled the defeated man up through the hole. Hardwick collapsed on the bridge, sobbing with relief and humiliation. Marshal Cole took custody, none too gently. "Silas Hardwick, you're under arrest. Again. This time you'll stand trial in Santa Fe. No local connections to save you." As they bound Hardwick's hands, Claire noticed Crow swaying. His reopened wounds bled freely, and his face had gone gray. "Crow Ellis." He smiled at her use of his given name. "Worth it?" he murmured, then collapsed into her arms. Doc Holcomb worked on him right there on the bridge while the sun climbed toward noon. Claire held Crow's head in her lap, smoothing his hair, whispering encouragements and threats in equal measure. "Don't you dare die on me." She told him, "We have a shop to rebuild, a town to restore, a life to—" She stopped, aware of their audience. "Finish that sentence," Crow said weakly, eyes fluttering open. "A life to what?" Claire looked around at their friends, at the saved bridge, at the future stretching open before them. Then she leaned down and kissed him, soft and sure, tasting dust and blood and promise. "A life to share," she whispered against his lips. "If you'll have me." "Woman, I just fought a man on a bridge with broken hands. What do you think?" The posse cheered, even proper Tom Bennett. In the distance, storm clouds gathered, but now they promised rain for crops, not floods of destruction. They improvised a travois for Crow, who protested he could ride until Doc threatened to sedate him. The journey back to Laredo Flats took on the quality of a parade, with workers from the camp joining their procession. Word had spread Hardwick was finished. Justice had won, and the town was free. But Claire noticed something else as they rode. The workers included Chinese, Irish, Mexicans, former slaves, all the people Hardwick had used and discarded. They looked at her and Crow with hope, as if their victory meant something larger. "We're not done," she told Crow as he dozed on the travois. Stopping Hardwick was just the beginning. This town needs rebuilding, right fair wages, equal treatment, justice for all. "Sounds like a lot of work," he mumbled. "Good thing I have a partner." His hand found hers, careful of bandages but firm in intent. Partners, I like the sound of that. As they approached Laredo Flats, the church bells began to ring. The whole town turned out, cheering their return. Rosa ran forward with water and clean bandages. Father O'Rourke blessed their success, even Mrs. Abernathy from the Temperance Society admitted that perhaps Claire's unconventional methods had merit. The sun was setting by the time they got Crow settled in Doc's surgery. Claire sat beside his bed, finally allowing exhaustion to claim her. "Rest," Crow told her. "Tomorrow we start building." "Today," she corrected, gesturing toward the window where townspeople were already clearing lots and making plans. "It's already begun." She was right. The pursuit of Hardwick had ended, but the pursuit of something better, community, justice, love that was just beginning. And as Claire dozed off holding Crow's bandaged hand, She knew they'd chase that dream together, no matter where it led. 6 months later, the new Agua Clara print and photography stood proud on Main Street, its fresh pine boards gleaming in the morning sun. Claire adjusted the sign one more time, McKendry and Crowell, proprietors, before stepping back to admire their work. "It's crooked," Crow observed from the doorway, his hands now healed but permanently scarred from that day on the bridge. "It's perfect," Claire corrected, linking her arm through his. "Just like us, a little bent, but standing strong." The town had transformed in the months since Hardwick's trial and conviction. With fair wages and honest dealing, the railroad construction proceeded smoothly. The federal government, embarrassed by the corruption exposed, sent administrators to ensure justice. Land rights were honored, water was shared equitably, and Laredo Flats began to thrive. Mrs. McKendry, Mrs. Crowell. Rosa Delgado hurried up, clutching a basket. "For the celebration tonight, tamales and my grandmother's special cake." Claire smiled at the still new name. They'd married a month ago in Father O'Rourke's church, with half the territory in attendance. She'd worn her mother's dress, hastily altered. And Crow had stood waiting in his one good suit, looking at her like she'd hung the moon. "Thank you. Rosa, how's the new irrigation working?" "Perfectly," Miguel says to tell Mr. Crowell the water wheel design is brilliant. We'll have the best harvest in years. Crow had spent the winter designing and building a system of water wheels and channels that distributed Agua Clara's precious water fairly among all the farms. His engineering skills, hidden for so long beneath the grime of mine work, had flourished. "The train will want to see it," Rosa added. "When does it arrive?" 3 o'clock. Claire checked her watch. "The first official passenger service to Laredo Flats. We're finally connected to the world." But it was a connection on their terms. The town council, newly elected and actually representative of all citizens, had negotiated fiercely with the railroad. No land grabs, no water monopolies, no exploitation of workers. Deputy now Sheriff Ellis appeared, badge polished bright. "Everything ready for the ceremony." "As ready as we'll ever be." Crow said, "You nervous about your speech?" Ellis grinned. "Terrified. But Doc Holcomb says fear keeps you honest." They'd all found new roles in the reborn town. Ellis had proven a fair and thoughtful lawman. Ben Martinez served as mayor. Tom Bennett ran a credit union that actually helped people instead of trapping them. Even Mrs. Abernathy had evolved. Her temperance society now focusing on education and support rather than judgment. The morning passed in a blur of preparations. Claire photographed the decorated streets, the banner reading, "Welcome to Laredo Flats where justice lives." The children practicing their songs for the celebration. Each image captured not just a moment, but a transformation. "You've got ink on your nose," Crow said, appearing with lunch. "You've got grease on your cheek," she countered, wiping it away with her thumb. "What were you working on?" "Surprise for later. Come eat." They sat in their small office, surrounded by the tools of their trades, her cameras and chemicals, his drafting table and engineering books. The walls held photographs telling their story, the burned shop, the trial in the church, the bridge confrontation, their wedding day. "Any regrets?" Crow asked, as he did sometimes, still amazed by their change in fortune. "Only one," Claire said seriously, then smiled at his concerned look. "That we didn't meet sooner. Think of all the years we could have been partners." "We're partners now. That's what matters." A knock interrupted them. Father O'Rourke entered, beaming. The bishop's response arrived. He announced, waving a letter. "They're approving funds for the new school. All children welcome, regardless of background." Claire hugged the priest while Crow shook his hand. Education had been their next campaign, ensuring every child in Laredo Flats could read, write, and choose their own future. 3 o'clock approached with the whole town gathering at the new depot. The building itself was modest but solid, built with local labor at fair wages. The water tower bore a plaque, Agua Clara, water for all. When the train whistle sounded in the distance, a cheer went up. Claire positioned her camera to capture the moment, the Iron Horse arriving not as conqueror but as connection, bringing possibilities instead of exploitation. The train pulled in with a hiss of steam and squealing brakes. Passengers peered out windows at the crowd. The conductor, a jovial Irishman named O'Brien, swung down first. "Laredo Flats," he called. "End of the line and beginning of dreams." What followed was controlled chaos. Passengers disembarked, some staying, some just stretching their legs. Merchants displayed wares. Children darted between legs. The band struck up a waltz. "Dance with me," Crow said, pulling Claire into the cleared space before the depot. "Here now, everyone's watching. Let them watch. Let them see what's possible when people stand together." They danced, her photographer's hands ink-stained as always, his engineer's hands scarred but sure. Around them, others joined in: Rosa and Miguel, Ellis and the schoolteacher he was courting, even Mrs. Abernathy with a blushing widower from the train. As the sun began to set, Mayor Martinez called for quiet. The speeches were brief but heartfelt, about community, about justice, about building something better from the ashes of corruption. Then Crow stepped forward. "I have something to add," he said, producing a wooden sign from behind the platform. Claire gasped. The sign read, "Laredo Flats Public Library opening soon," with her father's name listed as patron saint of knowledge. "The town council approved it this morning." Crow explained, "Your father believed in the power of information. Seems fitting his daughter's town should have a place where everyone can access it." Claire couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. The crowd applauded as she kissed her husband soundly, not caring who saw. As twilight painted the sky purple and gold, the celebration continued. The train would leave in the morning, carrying stories of a town that fought corruption and won, that chose community over cash, that proved justice could prevail. Claire found herself on the depot platform, watching the festivities. Crow joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "About hands," she said softly. "How they started this whole thing. Call him filthy, but his hands hold worth. I yelled that at a crowd ready to hang you. Best thing anyone ever yelled." Crow murmured, "Led to all this." Claire turned in his arms, placing her palms against his chest. "Your hands built water systems and dreams. Mine captured truth and fought lies. Together. Together we're pretty formidable. Together we're home." They kissed as the first stars appeared, as music drifted from the street, as their rebuilt town celebrated not just survival but triumph. Later, they walked hand in hand back to their shop. Above the door, barely visible in the gathering dark, Crow had added something to their sign, a small plate reading, "Established in hope, maintained by work, sustained by love." "When did you add that?" Claire asked. "This morning, while you were fussing with the straightness." "It's perfect," she said, unconsciously echoing her morning words. "Especially the crooked part." They climbed the stairs to their apartment, pausing at the window to look out over Laredo Flats. Lanterns glowed in windows. Music still played. Somewhere, children laughed. "We did it," Claire marveled. "We really did it." "We started it," Crow corrected. "This town, these people, they'll finish it. Build on it. Make it better than we ever dreamed." He was right. The seeds they'd planted with courage and conviction would grow for generations. The railroad would bring change, but Laredo Flats would meet it with strength and justice. In their bedroom, Claire lit the lamp while Crow pulled off his boots. Such ordinary actions, but precious for their ordinariness. They'd fought for the right to this simple life work that mattered, love that lasted, community that cared. "I love you," Claire said suddenly. "Have I mentioned that today?" "Only a dozen times." I was starting to worry. She threw a pillow at him, which led to laughter, which led to kisses, which led to the lamp being turned down as they celebrated their victory in the most ancient and joyful of ways. Outside, the train sat silent at the depot, waiting for tomorrow's journey. The stars wheeled overhead, constant and bright. And in the heart of Laredo Flats, in a room above a print shop, two people who'd saved each other held tight and dreamed of all the tomorrows to come. Their hands might be stained with ink and oil, marked by work and scarred by sacrifice, but those hands had built something beautiful and lasting, a love that would endure, a town that would thrive, a future bright with promise. The story that began with a near hanging ended with hope. And in the American West of 1878, in a little town that chose justice over fear, that was perhaps the greatest victory of all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Friends, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what you thought about Claire and Crow's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and love in the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories like this. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more people discover this story. Until next time, partners.